A convoy of luxury black SUVs sped through the streets of Abuja, escorted by heavily armed security personnel. Inside the lead vehicle sat Damilare Balogun, the son of Nigeria's president. Dressed in an expensive tailored suit, he leaned back with an air of confidence, scrolling through his phone as the motorcade approached Aso Rock Presidential Villa. Upon arrival, the gates opened smoothly and the convoy rolled in. Damilare stepped out, adjusting his cufflinks as he was ushered into his father's private study. President Balogun, a man feared and respected across the country, sat behind an imposing mahogany desk, his piercing eyes fixed on his son. "Damilare, it's time we discuss your future," the president said, his voice calm but authoritative. "Your political career is important. As my son, you must carry the family legacy. You must prepare yourself for leadership." Damilare smirked, already knowing where this conversation was heading. "And that includes settling down," the president continued. "The alliance with Governor Okafor is crucial. Marrying Adana will secure that alliance." Damilare sighed, rubbing his temple. "Father, you know I have options, plenty of them." The president's eyes darkened. "This isn't about options, it's about power. If you want to lead this nation one day, you need stability. You need a wife from a powerful family." Damilare leaned back, his smirk returning. "Fine, I'll do it. But Adana belongs to me. No one else should come near her." The Okafor mansion was the epitome of wealth and power, a grand estate that stood as a symbol of political influence. Adana Okafor, the beautiful and intelligent daughter of Governor Emeka Okafor, walked through the marble corridors, lost in thought. Outside, security personnel stood at their posts, ever watchful. Among them was Khalid Musa, her personal bodyguard. Khalid had always been a shadow, ever present yet unseen, a silent protector assigned to her by her father. But to Adana, he was more than just a bodyguard. He was the only one who truly saw her, not as the governor's daughter, not as Damilare Balogun's future wife, but as Adana. She had always been drawn to him, the quiet strength in his stance, the way his deep brown eyes studied everything with a calculated calm, the rare but genuine smiles he gave when she cracked a joke. Unlike Damilare, who flaunted his wealth and power, Khalid carried himself with an air of quiet confidence. He was a former elite military officer, disciplined and strong, but with a gentleness that made her feel safe. One evening, as the sun set over the Lagos skyline, she found herself alone with him in the estate's garden. The golden hues of twilight bathed them in a soft glow, and for a moment, the world outside their little space faded away. "You don't talk much," she said, breaking the silence. Khalid glanced at her, his lips twitching in a small smile. "I speak when necessary." She chuckled. "And when is that?" He hesitated before answering. "When words can change something." Adana studied him, intrigued. "And what would you change if you could?" Khalid looked at her then, truly looked at her as if searching for something in her gaze. "Your sadness." Her breath caught. No one had ever acknowledged it before, not her father, not Damilare, not even her closest friends, but Khalid had seen it. Before she could respond, a voice shattered the moment. "Adana!" She turned to see Damilare standing at the entrance of the garden, his expression dark with barely restrained jealousy. He strode toward them, his presence overwhelming, his eyes flickering between her and Khalid. "What the hell are you doing here with my fiancée?" Damilare demanded, his tone laced with venom. Khalid didn't flinch. "I was just doing my job." Damilare scoffed, stepping closer until he was towering over him. "Your job is to guard her, not whisper sweet words in her ear." Adana's heart pounded as she placed a hand on Damilare's chest, trying to calm him. "Damilare, stop. He's done nothing wrong." But Damilare wasn't listening. His hand shot out, grabbing Khalid by the collar. "Listen to me, you lowlife. Stay in your place or I'll make you disappear." Khalid remained still, his jaw tight, his fists clenched at his sides. He could have easily taken Damilar down, but he held back, for Adana's sake. Adana pushed Damilar away. "Enough!" she snapped. "You don't own me, Damilar." His expression turned cold, dangerous. "Oh, but I do, Adana, and I will make sure you never forget that." As he stormed off, Adana turned back to Khalid, her hands shaking. "I'm so sorry," Khalid exhaled, his gaze softening. "Don't apologize, just be careful." She nodded, but deep down she knew the truth. She was already in too deep. And for the first time in her life, she didn't want to escape. Adana had made up her mind. She wanted out of her engagement with Damilare. The love she once thought she had for him had turned into fear and exhaustion. Behind closed doors, Damilare was not the charming son of the president the world admired. He was possessive, controlling, and sometimes violent. The emotional and physical toll had left her drained, and she could no longer pretend to be happy. When Adana confesses her desire to leave Damilare, her father supports her decision, but their world turns upside down when the president personally intervenes. A call from Aso Rock came swiftly. The president's voice was laced with cold fury. "Governor Okafor, control your daughter, or I will destroy your political ambitions." The governor, taken aback, attempted to reason with him. "Mr. President, I understand your concerns, but my daughter is not happy with your son. Damilare is abusive." "Enough," the president cut him off sharply. "I will not tolerate this nonsense. Your daughter will marry my son as planned, and if she dares humiliate him, you will suffer the consequences." The governor clenched his fists, torn between protecting his daughter and his own political survival. He knew President Balogun was not a man to make empty threats. If he defied him, his political career would be over. Adana, however, was not willing to be a pawn any longer. She knew leaving Damilare would come at a price, but she was willing to fight for her freedom, no matter the cost. Damilare sat in his lavish penthouse suite, his fingers drumming rhythmically against the marble table as he scrolled through his phone. The image of Adana standing too close to Khalid in the garden still burned in his mind. His grip tightened around the phone as jealousy and insecurity gnawed at him. No, he would not let this happen. He would not allow some lowly bodyguard to steal what belonged to him. If Adana refused to listen, he would eliminate the problem himself. Damilare called two of his most trusted men, sharp-dressed, ruthless operatives who had carried out his dirty work before. "I want him gone," he said, his voice sharp as glass, "but I don't want it to lead back to me. Frame him." The plan was simple but effective. That night, his men snuck into Khalid's modest apartment and slipped an expensive Rolex watch, Damilar's own, under his pillow. The following morning, Damilar put on a well-rehearsed performance, dramatically claiming his prized Rolex had been stolen. With a look of exaggerated disappointment, he called in the authorities. "I've received a tip-off," he announced to his security detail. "That thief has my watch. Search his place." The security team stormed Khalid's apartment with calculated precision. Khalid, still groggy from sleep, had no time to react before they began ransacking the place. Within minutes, one of the officers triumphantly held up the Rolex. "There it is, sir." Khalid shot up from his bed, disbelief and fury flashing across his face. "That's not mine. I've been set up." Adana had been standing at the doorway, her hand pressed against her lips in shock. She locked eyes with Khalid, searching for any sign of deceit in his expression, but she saw only desperation. "Adana, you know me! You know I wouldn't do this!" Khalid pleaded, trying to step toward her, but the guards restrained him. Adana hesitated, her heart pounding. She opened her mouth to speak, to defend him, but Damilare was already beside her, his hand gripping her shoulder possessively. "Thieves always deny their crimes," Damilare sneered. "Take him away!" Khalid struggled as they dragged him out, his shouts of innocence drowned by the jeering crowd outside. Days later, a court sentenced him to several years in prison with hard labor. Meanwhile, Officer Tunde, a prison officer, sat hunched over his desk, his head in his hands. He had taken a loan from Damilare's bank to help take care of the cost of an expensive surgery his wife had undergone. He had used his house as a collateral for the loan, but now he was finding it difficult to pay back. And now Damilare had given him an ultimatum. "Kill Khalid, and I will cancel your debt," Damilare had said. "Refuse, and your family loses everything." Tunde clenched his fists. He was a good man. He had sworn to uphold the law, to protect the innocent. But what was he supposed to do? Lose his home? Let his wife suffer? Tears welled in his eyes as he stared at the eviction notice from the bank. The weight of the decision pressed down on him like a boulder. He had 2 weeks to make the hardest choice of his life. Inside the cold, grey walls of the prison, Khalid worked under the scorching sun, breaking rocks alongside hardened criminals. His muscles ached, his body screamed for rest, but what tortured him more was the realization that this was all because of Adana, not because she had betrayed him. He knew she had nothing to do with it, but because she had dared to love him. Every shadow in the prison felt like a threat, every fellow inmate a potential enemy. He knew Damilare wouldn't just leave him to rot. He'd make sure he never left this place alive. Khalid slept lightly, always aware of the eyes on him. He had to stay alive. If he was going to die, he wouldn't go down without a fight. Unbeknownst to Damilare, Khalid and Tunde were childhood friends. He owed him too much. As children, when Tunde had gone hungry, it had been Khalid who shared his food. Now it was his turn to save his old friend. He had made his decision. He would not betray Khalid. Late one evening, while the prisoners were being transported back from labor duty, Tunde orchestrated a carefully planned accident. As Khalid walked past the prison yard's storage facility, Tunde signaled to a trusted guard, who swiftly pushed a heavy cart of supplies directly into Khalid's path. Khalid fell hard, hitting his head against the pavement. He remained motionless as blood pooled beneath him, his breathing slowing. Guards rushed to the scene, and Tunde, playing his role, checked for a pulse. After a tense moment, he stood up and declared, "He's gone." The warden ordered Khalid's body to be sent to the mortuary immediately. At the mortuary, Tunde's cousin, who worked there, was already waiting. In the dead of night, they swapped Khalid's body with that of an unclaimed accident victim. With no family to identify the deceased, the switch went unnoticed. Tunde pressed a thick envelope of cash into Khalid's hand. "Take this. Disappear. Go as far as you can." Khalid, still weak from his injuries, looked at his friend one last time. "Thank you, Tunde. I owe you my life." Tunde shook his head. "Just live. That's all I need you to do." With that, Khalid slipped into the night, a ghost in the wind. Back at the Okafor mansion, Adana was inconsolable. News of Khalid's death had reached her, and she felt as though her world had crumbled. She locked herself in her room for days, refusing food, refusing to speak. Damilare, sensing her devastation, tried to comfort her, but his presence only fueled her anger. "You did this," she whispered bitterly one evening as he tried to hold her. "You killed him." Damilare smirked. "He was a nobody, Adana. I just helped you see that." But Adana's grief was deeper than he could ever understand. And somewhere in the depths of her sorrow, a fire of vengeance began to burn. Months had passed since Khalid's disappearance, and Officer Tunde had tried to move on, convincing himself that he had done the right thing. But the guilt lingered. He had helped save his old friend, yet Damilare was still free, still walking the streets as if he hadn't destroyed a man's life. One evening, after a long shift at the prison, Tunde slumped onto his couch, scrolling mindlessly through his phone. His finger hovered over an old recording file, one he didn't recognize. Curious, he pressed play. Static filled his ears at first, followed by muffled voices, and then, "Kill Khalid, and I will cancel your debt. Refuse, and your family loses everything." Tunde's breath hitched. His hands trembled as he sat up, heart pounding. It was his conversation with Damilare, the one where he had been blackmailed into killing Khalid. Somehow, in his state of distress that day, he must have unknowingly hit the record button. For a moment, he just stared at the phone, his mind racing. This was it. The proof he never thought he had. The undeniable evidence that could expose Damilare and bring justice to Khalid. Tunde wasted no time. He tracked down Khalid, who had settled into a quiet, hidden life outside the city, and sent him a message with only 3 words. "I have proof." Hours later, they met in a dimly lit cafe on the outskirts of town. Khalid's face was different now, hardened by betrayal and suffering, but his eyes still burned with the same fire. Tunde slid the phone across the table and hit play. The recording echoed in the quiet space, each word slicing through the air like a blade. When it ended, Khalid let out a slow breath. He clenched his jaw, gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles turned white. "So it was all him," he muttered. "He orchestrated everything." Tunde nodded. "And now we can destroy him." Adana had spent months grieving, trapped in a cycle of anger and despair. Her once vibrant spirit had dimmed, and no matter how much Damilare tried to console her, she refused to let him in. When she received a call from an unknown number, she almost didn't answer, but something told her to pick up. "Adana!" came the voice from the other end. She froze, the phone nearly slipping from her fingers. "Khalid?" Tears welled in her eyes as he spoke, explaining everything. How he had been framed, how he had faked his death, and how Damilare had been behind it all. She listened in stunned silence, her heart pounding against her ribs. When he played the recording for her, rage flooded through her veins. "I knew it," she whispered, gripping the phone tightly. "I knew Damilare had something to do with it." She wiped her tears away, replacing grief with determination. "We're going to make him pay." With Adana now on their side, they knew they needed to act fast. They couldn't go after Damilare blindly. He was powerful, with deep political connections. They needed a solid plan. Using Adana's family connections, they hired one of the best legal teams in the country. The lawyers knew the weight of the case. Damilare Balogun, the son of the president, accused of conspiracy, blackmail, and attempted murder. It would shake Nigeria to its core. The legal team advised them to strengthen their case. They brought in the mortuary officer who had helped swap the bodies. They collected testimonies from prison guards who had seen Tunde's suspicious behavior. Piece by piece, they built an airtight case. Then they made their boldest move. They leaked the recording to the media. The recording spread like wildfire, hitting news stations and social media within hours. The headline read, "Son of the Nigerian President Damilare Balogun exposed in blackmail and attempted murder plot." The country erupted. Protests broke out, demanding Damilare's arrest. News anchors debated the scandal, investigative journalists dug into his past, and government officials scrambled to contain the damage. Meanwhile, inside the Okafor mansion, Adana watched Damilare pace back and forth, his usually smug demeanor replaced with nervous agitation. "You did this!" he hissed at her, his eyes dark with fury. Adana didn't flinch. She stood tall, her voice calm but firm. "No, Damilare, you did this to yourself." For the first time, Damilare saw it. The woman he had tried to control, to possess, was no longer his. She had turned against him, and she was going to be the one to bring him down. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as the trial of Damilare Balogun, son of the President of Nigeria, unfolded. Cameras flashed, journalists scrambled for the best angles, and the nation watched in shock as the once untouchable banking tycoon sat in the defendant's chair, his hands clasped tightly together. The evidence against him was insurmountable. Officer Tunde's accidental recording had been played before the entire court, sending a ripple of gasps through the audience. The chilling exchange between Damilare and Tunde, the threats, the coercion, the blatant abuse of power, left the jury and spectators in stunned silence. Adana, sitting beside Khalid in the front row, squeezed his hand tightly. This was the moment they had fought for. This was justice. The prosecution presented witness after witness. Officer Tunde testified, recounting his dilemma, his ultimate decision to save Khalid, and the elaborate plan to fake his death. The mortuary officer confirmed the body swap, revealing the extent of the deception. Even Adana took the stand, her voice strong and unwavering, as she detailed the pain, the betrayal, and the horrors Damilare had orchestrated. Damilare's defense, despite being spearheaded by the country's most expensive lawyers, crumbled under the weight of the truth. Every argument was met with irrefutable evidence. The judge's expression remained neutral, but the severity of the crimes committed had already sealed Damilare's fate. Finally, the verdict was delivered. Guilty on all counts. The courtroom erupted into chaos. Some cheered, others gasped in disbelief. Damilare's face drained of color as reality set in. He had lost. He, the privileged son of Nigeria's president, was now nothing more than a convicted criminal. The president attempted to intervene, pulling political strings behind closed doors. But the scandal was too great, the public outcry too deafening. His hands were tied. To protect his own legacy, he was forced to distance himself from his son's sins. Damilare was sentenced to multiple years in prison, stripped of his wealth, power, and reputation. The very prison where he had once sent Khalid would now be his home. Justice had come full circle. As Damilare faded into infamy, Governor Okafor's reputation soared. His unwavering commitment to justice won the hearts of the people. He seized the momentum, launching a campaign for the presidency. His victory was swift and decisive, a landslide win that crowned him as Nigeria's new leader. Under his administration, reforms swept the nation, targeting corruption, abuse of power, and judicial inefficiencies. The case of Damilare Balogun became a symbol of change, a reminder that no one, no matter their status, was above the law. With the storm behind them, Khalid and Adana finally found peace. Their love, tested by fire, had emerged unshaken. Their wedding was a grand affair, celebrated by thousands, broadcasted live across the country. It was more than just a union. It was a testament to resilience, to hope, to the power of standing against injustice. As a final twist of fate, President Okafor appointed Khalid as the Minister of Defense. A man who had once been framed, betrayed, and left to die was now one of the most powerful figures in the country's security sector. His past had forged him into a leader, one who understood both power and vulnerability. Meanwhile, Damilare languished in prison, a mere shadow of his former self. The prince had fallen, his empire had crumbled, and his name had become a cautionary tale. In the end, justice had prevailed, love had won, and the governor's daughter had rewritten her own fate.